Welcome to the Culture Lab. I'm your host, Bajer. This podcast helps you turn your company culture into rocket fuel for meaningful growth. It gives you the tools and inspiration to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. This is where we explore how to cultivate remarkable cultures that scale and evolve as our businesses grow and the world keeps on changing.
What's so powerful about the framework is that it's very tactical and practical for leaders, but also everyone in the organization, of things that we can do and how we can show up and language we can use to name the root causes of workplace injustice, which we define as bias, prejudice, and bullying. And the simple definitions that we use is bias is not meaning it. It's unconscious. Prejudice is meaning it, right? We double down on a harmful stereotype or belief. And then bullying is being mean with the intent to cause harm.
This episode is brought to you by CultureBrained, a one-of-a-kind accelerator program where culture leaders get hands-on support and guidance on how to reach their goals faster, especially now in this brave new world of remote and hybrid work. CultureBrained connects you with outstanding peers on the same journey, but also with world-class experts, including people you know from the show. And they all help you identify and implement new, better ways of creating a culture where people do their best work. Check it out at tinyurl.com/culturebrained. And no need to write it down. There's a link in the show notes. Before I dive into today's show, I need to do a little happy dance because when I looked at the show stats last week, I was blown away by how many of you choose to follow the show on this app. And while seeing these numbers grow is amazing in itself, I'm more excited about the community that we've built together as a result. And also, I'm excited about the impact our listeners are making on the workplace around the globe. And as we move into 2023, we have even bigger and more exciting plans for the show. We're always looking for ways to make our conversations more meaningful, more valuable, and more actionable for all of you. So if you want to support us and help us make that happen, all you gotta do is hit that follow button on the app that you are listening to. It's like a virtual high five from you to us, and it means the world to us because it allows us to promote the show better and helps others to discover it. So thank you for being a part of this journey with us. I can't wait to see what 2023 has in store for us. Let's do this. Now, let me officially welcome you to episode 104 with the amazing trio Bryant, where we'll explore the intersection of culture, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. And it's funny because when it comes to creating a truly just workplace, I've noticed that a lot of companies seem to be more interested in ticking off diversity boxes than actually creating an inclusive culture. But let's be real. DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, is not just about numbers. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. I've been in this game for a while now, and I've seen firsthand the consequences of neglecting equity and inclusion. I've seen organizations that boast about their commitment to representation lose new hires from underrepresented groups just months after they joined the company because of the non-inclusive culture that these people encountered. And my guest today, trio Bryant, she puts it perfectly when she says, if even your straight white men don't have a good experience at work, increasing diversity of your workforce will not solve the problem. It will probably make it worse. Tria suggests that while diversity is important, incredibly important, of course, We should start, though, with inclusion and equity, because we need to ensure that everyone in our organization is included and feels a sense of belonging. We need to have processes and we need to have a culture that are free of bias and create an environment where everyone can thrive. Trier Bryant is the president of H2VS, a Lloyd Therapeutics affiliated venture studio that builds and invests in next generation biotech companies. And she's also the co-founder and CEO of Just Work, a company that helps organizations and individuals create more equitable workplaces. With over 15 years of experience in technology, Wall Street, and the military, Trier is a strategic executive and a really influential diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. So let's hear what she has to say about creating truly inclusive and equitable workplaces. Without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with the amazing Trier Bryant.
My name's Trier Bryant, and I am the president of 82VS, which is the venture studio that sits within Alloy Therapeutics, and also the CEO co-founder of Just Work. I have built my career as a people leader in roles where I can help organizations and lead organizations to take care of our people so that the people can take care of the mission. And I have had the privilege, because I do think that leadership is a privilege, to do this across the military and the Air Force as an active duty officer, across Wall Street, technology, and now venture capital.
I love everything that you have just said. I can't wait to unpack leadership being privilege and so many other things. But before we go there, there's one question that I kick every conversation off with, and it's to build the context around who you are as a person, as a human being. So the question is about your early cultural influences that shaped you as a person. How did you grow up, and what imprint did that leave on Trier today?
I love that question because I feel like for my career and what I've done, it really does give the context needed. So I was actually born and raised in Europe. I was born in Trier, Germany, which is where my name comes from. Kind of unoriginal if you think about it for my parents. And I lived all over Germany, Belgium, and then the Netherlands.
Do you speak German?
German was my first language. Flemish was my second, and then started to learn and speak English. It was a really hard language for my mom to have me maintain in the United States, finding other people that spoke German. For a little Black girl growing up, we didn't move to the US until like towards the end of primary school, moving to Minnesota, and then later on moving to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was in the 5th and 6th grade. That's where I really started to understand race. It was the first time I was called the N-word at school, and having to come home and ask my mom what that meant. That has very much shaped my introduction into what does inclusion mean, what does equity mean, what does diversity mean, and thinking about that in middle school and then high school ever since then, through college at the Air Force Academy, through my career.
What was that experience like, being called the N-word and then going to your mom and asking her what it means?
I was at school, and I remember it was like my first week at school. We were outside for PE and like recess gym, and they had the whole class run around the basketball court one time, and then everyone sat down. And then the coach said, and the nigglets, you all need to run around the court again. And some of the kids got up and started running, and a little Black girl said, Trier, he's talking to us, like we have to run again. Now, Aga, let me tell you, I didn't like to run then. I don't like to run now. So that just did not sit right with my spirit. And so I went home and I said, Mom, what is a niglet? And I don't want to be it because the niglets have to run more at school. And she was like, come again? What did you say? And she marched herself up to the school, and he got fired, and it was handled, but it was hard. My mother told me at a very young age, you have to work 3 times as hard. You have to work twice as hard because you're a woman. You have to work 3 times as hard because you're Black. And you're going to have to work extra hard on top of that because you're a Black woman. Not everybody as a child has their parents sending that message and preparing them for that world. to have those experiences when you are so young is unfortunate, but I also feel like it allowed me to then enter high school, enter college, and enter my professional career with my eyes wide open.
Yeah, I think it's so true that I think for some people, they are caught by surprise. I mean, depending what background they grew up and what was their initial sort of early childhood environment. But I did hear stories from people being really caught by surprise, suddenly being considered to be the other slightly later in their life. So, whilst painful, and I understand the experience and what the impact it must have had on you just based on the fact that you still remember the vivid details of the whole situation to this day. These are the moments that I think really we never forget because they are so painful. But as you say, at least you entered the world with your eyes wide open.
And that has really shaped my career on the decisions that I've made and the profession that I've chose, because in those moments of feeling included, in those moments of seeing people that look like me, brought out the best in me. And I know how instrumental it was in my life. And so how do I recreate that for others as a leader? And how do I help organizations create those environments where everyone can come, feel included, have a seat at the table, get fed the same, and do their best work and just work, which is literally the name of the company in the book.
Yes, exactly. You are the co-founder of Just Work alongside Kim Scott, who was a guest on our show as well a while ago. Let's start with how you define a just workplace. What is it?
So a just workplace is where we can optimize for individuality and collaboration to create the conditions for just work. Where when we do that, people can not only just come and just work, but it's just work as in justice. What's so powerful about the framework is that it's very tactical and practical for leaders, but also everyone in the organization, of things that we can do and how we can show up and language we can use to name the root causes of workplace injustice, which we define as bias, prejudice, and bullying. And the simple definitions that we use is bias is not meaning it. It's unconscious. Prejudice is meaning it, right? We double down on a harmful stereotype or belief. And then bullying is being mean with the intent to cause harm.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so powerful for me is when I first met Kim and was introduced to this framework, if you were to ask me, Trier, have you ever been bullied in your career? I'd be like, no. Have you met me? Like, you come for me, I'm going to come for you, right? And then Kim is like, well, Trier, bullying is just being mean. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've been bullied so much in my career. But the thing is that I didn't have the language to name it. So I never asked anyone to stop it or hold anyone accountable because I couldn't name it in that way. Therefore, we couldn't solve for it. As leaders and individuals, when we can't name something, then we can't solve it.
Yes. Language is so incredibly important.
Language is so important.
So thanks for sharing the definitions. And also, I find, the name of the book and the name of your company so brilliant because, as you said, it means two different things. One is just work. And for me, it's so incredibly important, right? Creating an environment where people can just work without worrying about being singled out, excluded, bullied, without all that unnecessary friction that I think most people in the workplace.
All the noise.
And the noise, yes, exactly. And the noise that you experience, it's completely unnecessary. And it's such a gift to be able to do just work without all that baggage.
There's that invisible tax that we often talk about. It's that burden, that invisible tax. And as leaders, we don't pause and think about what that is, particularly when we are leaders that may not experience much of that harm. We often use the analogy of mosquito bites. Everyone has a mosquito bite every now and then. But there are people in your organization that are getting bit every meeting, every engagement, every day, and have tens of mosquito bites. And if we think that they're going to be able to be productive and contribute and do their best work, it's not happening. And so what can we do to reduce that? I will be very honest, Aga, when people say, oh, you can eliminate bias, we're humans. But we're bringing a lot of baggage as individuals and everything to the workplace. There's no one pager. And it's interesting because our clients ask for this often. Trier, Kim, just work. What's the one pager? Everything we shouldn't say, everything we shouldn't do that causes harm.
Oh, I wish I had one.
Right. People in our organizations come from such rich cultures, rich backgrounds. There is no one pager, but we can reduce the harm. And we also know that bias is a pattern and we can break that pattern. And so we can reduce it and we can create environments where we can disrupt the bias. And so that can create learning moments for us all to learn so we can change our behaviors, change our habits and move forward.
Yeah. I think it's so incredibly important. And I want to share a story with you to set the context for the rest of our conversation and ask you about how we remove that harm. How do we reduce the number of those mosquito bites? But I want to frame it in the story because I think probably a lot of our listeners will identify with it. So there's a company that I'm familiar with and that I worked with in the past. It's an organization that was really very, very intentional about representation. And it reached the point where if you would have asked me, give me a few examples of companies that have admirable levels of diversity, I think I would have mentioned them. No, 100%, I would have mentioned them. But after a while, I started getting really unsettling messages from people from within that company, from people of color who told me, this is a racist environment and I can't take it anymore. And some of the most talented people that this company was able to recruit eventually quit. And that was a huge shock to me. I didn't know them that intimately, but on the surface, they were really committed to creating diversity. But obviously, on the inside, as you say, there was a lot of harm. There was a lot of bias. There was a lot of prejudice and bullying. And I think the leaders of the organization were not aware of it. And they were completely caught by surprise with what happened. And then eventually, they hired a consultancy to help them understand what happened. This is exactly what's happening in many organizations. The intentions sometimes are there, but the environment is not ready to help people thrive.
That's right.
Yeah. Talk to me about that.
And there's so many organizations, and you started this so beautifully saying representation, because there's a difference between diversity and representation. And when you said representation, that very clearly painted the picture of an organization of what we were talking about. And also the fact that most organizations in this time where everyone talks about, we need more diverse teams, we need more representation in our organization. Diversity is the numbers. It's the composition. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're not synonyms. They're there for a reason. It's DE&I for a reason. They're together for a reason. Diversity is the composition. It's the numbers, right? It's the makeup of the organization. Equity are we having processes that are free of bias, that are equitable for everyone? Your hiring process, how people come into the organization, how you pay people, how you promote people, how they have access to opportunities for promotion, how they have access to learning and development, and also relationship building within organizations, all of it. The inclusion part is, how do people feel when they're in the organization, right? Are they thriving or are they surviving? And so it's very different. And so we actually challenge our partners and clients that we work with that you actually want to think about it as IED. There's no reason to be focused on bringing more women into your organization, to be bringing more Asians into your organization, to be bringing more Indigenous folks into your organization, to be bringing more Black professionals into your organization if they're only going to experience harm, if they're going to have to survive versus thrive. So let's focus on the inclusion part and the equitable part, and then open our arms and say, we want you here because you're going to have a positive experience. And it's so interesting, Aga, that people talk about diversity recruiting is hard. Finding underrepresented talent is hard. It's a pipeline problem. One, we're so beyond that. That is a dated narrative. It is not a pipeline problem. However, two, I actually tell leaders and people that are looking for diverse talent, it's actually quite easy. Why? Because most of this talent are not having positive experience in their organizations. They're looking for something better. And if you can articulate that, communicate that, and actually provide it, you will be shocked at the talent that you can find,
I love that.
that you will find.
So, what are some of the concrete things that this company should have done before maybe they started thinking about and getting to the D in this equation? What do you advise your clients to do to really create the right environment first before they look even at the numbers potentially?
The first thing that people do, and again, it's the right intention, are they'll say, oh, well, we did a diversity survey. We did an engagement survey. And that's a starting point. And you're going to get some data points from that. But let's all think about how busy we are in our workday. And then you get that email and they're like, fill out this quick survey. It's only going to take 5 minutes. You fill it out. You click, I'm a 5 on this. I'm a 3 on this. I might give you 1 or 2 bullets, but you're busy and you're going to run through it. It is amazing when we go into organizations and we say, we want to talk to your employees. We want to have a pulse from your employees. We want to understand how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what their experiences are. And they go, oh, that's great. We just did an engagement survey. We just did a DEI survey. We'll give you the results. We'll say, that's fine. We'll take them. But we like to do roundtables.
Why? Why is it important to meet people and set a table?
It is so important to give people the space and the platform to actually share and for others to listen. And here's the other part is that I actually think it's even more powerful to do 2 things that go along with that. One is to have an external person do it that understands and knows how to facilitate these discussions, right? Because there's going to be a lot of harmful things that come out. And what we tell leaders is that if you think it's not happening in your organization, 1, you don't know where to look, or 2, you don't know what you're looking for.
Oh my God, this is so good, Tria. I think you have to say that again. I'm sorry for jumping in, but I feel like every single organization that I've met, they think that it's not happening in their organization.
They think it's not happening, and it is. But it's either 1, you don't know what you're looking for, or 2, you don't know where to look. And when you bring someone in that does, you will find it. And that's not to say anything bad. We manage the expectations of leaders. We are going to come with not good news. And we may come with some good news. I don't know, right? The good news is, I'm not quite sure, but I'm definitely telling you we're going to come with not so great news. And that's okay. And to manage your expectations, right? But you'd rather be a leader that says, I know that it's happening and I want to know so that I can fix it versus turning and not acknowledging it. You want to know that. So having an external person that knows where to look and knows what they're looking for to facilitate these conversations. But the second thing that we've learned over doing this for several years is we actually have an exec observer in every roundtable, and every executive leader has to go to at least 2. And what the executive observer does, we do this whether it's virtual or in person. If it's in person, they sit on the kind of outside of the room, no phone, no laptop, nothing to write down, and they just listen. They may not engage. And they also get directions of no verbals, but also no nonverbals. So someone can't say, well, I don't feel included as a woman at this organization, and then have the CFO sitting off to the side, gasping, sighing, and rolling their eyes, right? Neutral face, no verbals, no nonverbals. You just have to take it in. When we do it virtually, they're on the Zoom and they turn their camera off, but they're there. But we make them take notes and share with us kind of like their big, largest 3 takeaways. So we know that they're engaged and paying attention. I got powerful things happen here. 1, when we then go and we debrief with the executive team, it no longer puts my team in a situation where the leaders will say, oh, well, Trier, your team doesn't know our culture. That's not really what they said. That's not what they meant. There's always an exec in the room that says, nope, I was actually in that conversation, that roundtable. That's how our people feel. That's what our people said. We have had execs that have been moved to tears, that have taken immediate action coming out of that, that have, left and had one-on-one conversations. There was one organization where this was under the previous administration in the United States. They were just talking about being DACA. They were undocumented. And there was a leader that immediately went to them and personally helped them with that situation and how to navigate it, because the company actually wasn't doing enough and they weren't aware. And so many of their immigration policies that the organization changed, they just were unaware. So a lot of powerful things will happen when, again, organizations, most leaders, you want to do better for your people. You just don't know that these things are occurring. When you know better, you can do better.
Yeah. And Also love it. And this is something that Rohini Anand shared with us as well. She's a person who's in this space as well. And she used to be head of diversity, equity, and inclusion in Sodexo for many years. And she talked about running similar interventions where basically she would have groups of people discuss the challenges that they faced and having executives just listen. And she also shared that it led to such a powerful personal transformation for these people. And this is what we know, people who are in the space of shaping culture, that there's nothing more powerful than an experience. If you want someone to change a point of view or embrace a different mindset, you can talk their ears off with very eloquent speeches, but that's not going to change anything. But if you have them experience something like that, it's just hard not to open your heart to it or not to open your mind to it. So I totally get why that would be so powerful. And even the fact that the organization commits to invest, to make that investment of time as well, I think it's also super powerful, because it's almost like these people are busy, and it's a big statement that I am actually going to commit my whole senior leadership team to spend that time to really understand and to listen, not to defend our positions, not to pretend that it's not happening.
Just listen.
Just listen.
It's really important right now, Aga, especially in this, I hate saying post-COVID environment, right? If we passed it all, like who knows? But in this environment where people are coming back together, so much has happened. I don't think that we talk enough about that. Regardless of where you were in the world, COVID was a traumatic experience on multiple levels. Literally, we know that the entire world went through a traumatic experience for over a year, well over a year. I don't think that we're showing enough consideration or giving enough space in our organization to understand that we are dealing with talent and employees that have just dealt with trauma or are still dealing with trauma, and how much time it's going to take to heal and what that means. It's not just, oh, well, I'm at work, so I'm not healing. Oh, only when I'm at home. There has to be space, and people have so much built up that literally just providing space for people to talk and share. And here's the other thing that we've also learned is that listening can also be healing as well. A lot of times people will come to these spaces that we create and they don't want to talk. They don't want to share, but they get so much from hearing others because they don't feel alone. It's that moment of, okay, I feel the same way. I'm not alone. And I just needed to hear that. I don't have to contribute, but there's power in just coming together and just sitting in that and listening and sharing.
I love that. Such an important first step. And thank you for broadening the context for this, because indeed, the trauma is so visible everywhere we go. We work with organizations as well. And every single time we talk with employees within companies, people talk about this. People talk about how difficult it is still to this day, and how it definitely doesn't feel like we're back to normal. I'm doing air quotes now for our listeners who can't see us. Triya, I'm curious if our listeners are like, yeah, oh my gosh, I love this. I think that we should be doing this in our organization. Aside from the fact that, as you've mentioned, it's always wise to have a third party come in and help you facilitate that, do you have any other pieces of advice on how to do it well? And obviously, what to do with the information that you have collected after listening?
Yes, exactly. Because we don't want to collect data that we're not going to do anything with. We feel strongly about that. Yeah. So 2 things on that. 1, inclusion has to be inclusive. Inclusion has to be inclusive. And oftentimes, some of the organization's strongest inclusion initiatives are exclusive. So what we mean by that is when we do roundtables, we give space for people with shared identities to come, to have that space, to have a dialogue of, hey, we are women with a shared intersection. So we have some shared experiences and there's a level of comfort of sharing what's happened. But how do you divide those roundtables and create those spaces so that at least everyone in your organization can attend one? That is our minimum. So even for your majority group, which in most organizations will be your cis straight white men, they have to have a space to come, because inclusion and these experiences are about everyone. It's not just about the underrepresented. It's about everyone. And it's not just about, hey, everyone needs to feel included, but everyone needs to include. And everyone needs to be inclusive.
This is such a fresh viewpoint, Trier. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of this discourse about inclusion focuses on the so-called minority groups. And that, of course, causes a lot of defensiveness and fear and resistance. And when you think about this, it's such a simple solution. Just inclusion needs to be inclusive, full stop. And everyone needs to get a space to talk about their experiences.
That's right. And let me tell you something. When you get your cis straight white men together and you ask them how they feel in an organization,
What do they say? I'm curious. Yeah, tell us.
if you have a problem there, just know it is worse for everyone else.
Sure.
I went into an organization once. I'd been there for about 3 months. Their new chief people officer and the CEO was like, Trier, where's our diversity strategy? Like, we need to really focus on hiring more women and hiring more Hispanic professionals to come into the organization, right? You said that was important. So where's the strategy? And I was like, no, we don't need to hire anyone to come into this organization like that. And he was like, why not? And I said, because we have a problem with our cis straight white men. They're not having a positive experience here. They think it's a toxic work culture. We need to fix that before anyone else comes into this organization, right? He laughed. And I was like, no, I'm being serious. It's a real telling point. And then I would also say Black women. How are the Black women in your organization feeling and what are their experiences? And that's telling as well. Really just giving space, though, for everyone to be heard, right? And then the second part is, well, what are we doing with this information? Let's not over-engineer this, but there's a really fantastic graphic. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Aga. The first time I saw it was in the military, but it's a graphic of a tire swing, right? And it's what the employees asked for. And it's a swing. And then it's what the CEO heard. And it's this
Yes.
very elaborate, comfortable chair that's a swing. And then it's what the CFO was billed for. And it's like a roller coaster, right? But then it's like what the actual employees really needed. And it was a simple tire swing. One, let's listen and hear between the lines of what our employees are really asking for and what they're saying. But let's also just realistically say, what do they need, right? And let's not over-engineer it, but let's give it to them. And I think that that's number one, that when we get that feedback, there's things that are very actionable that are quick wins. There's things that are process related. And then there's things that we just have to introduce into the organization. And all those things can be present. It's not a one quick fix. And I think that organizations have to go into this with budget. We have to be realistic, right? Budget could also be, in one organization, it was, hey, people want to be recognized and rewarded. So they brought in one of those. There's a lot of tools out there where people can gift points and it was great working on this project with you. Here's a $25 gift card to PetSmart because I know you like cats, right? Which is meaningful to someone. I worked in an organization where we had one of those platforms. Everyone knew that I didn't cook and I ordered Uber twice a day to eat. So everyone would give me points for Uber Eats that I could use, right? And I was like, thanks, it's dinner tonight, right? It's personal. So that is what came out of that for that organization. But it sounds really simple, but listen and take that into how you turn that into actionable things that your organization can do. And they don't have to be big, crazy, expensive things, right?
Yeah, for
They
sure.
can be very simple things that go a long way. We actually have a workshop called Subtle and Significant. And it's subtle things that a leadership can do to have a significant impact on their team.
Yeah, we talk about high leverage things, similar concept. And I remember, recently we had Charles Vogel on the show and he talked about his definition of belonging. And it's such a simple one. He said, people feel like they belong when they feel understood at an intellectual and emotional level. And I would add to that, understood and accepted. But as you say, once you understand people at an emotional and intellectual level, then you can really address those needs. But first, you need to take time and energy and put energy into understanding people. I want to zoom out a little bit from specific needs that people might have, that obviously it's important to note down and act on them, because you really have such a front row seat to what these employee groups say. Is there a universal need that comes up in your conversations when you organize these events, these listening sessions that comes up over and over again?
Yes.
What is it?
To be heard. And it's so simple. The question that I ask, and almost every time I ask it, whether it's in a group or a one-on-one conversation, what do you need and what do you want to do? And people are so taken aback because they're like, no one's ever asked me that. What do you need and what do you want to do? And when I say, what do you want to do? What do you want to do in your work? Yeah, you're in this job, but is that actually what you want to be doing? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be in the organization that you feel you can provide the biggest impact? I believe that we get the most from our people when we put them in the roles, not only where they have the skill set for the job that we need to get done, but that they want to be doing. People know what they're good at and where they want to spend their time. And when they're somewhere where they want to be, you're going to get so much more out of them.
So true.
That is also one of the key things to building high performing teams. Let people do what they're good at. Let them have a part in what that role is and designing the impact that they make to your organization.
Mm-hmm.
People just want to be heard in a way that they feel like they're truly being listened to. Because if you say, oh, well, we have weekly all hands and people can ask questions. And if people are still saying, well, we don't feel like leadership is hearing us, that means that they feel like they're yelling and talking into an open void.
Yeah, totally.
That's not working.
If there's one thing that is not happening in organizations, is exactly that. And so it's obvious that it's a need, it's an inherent human need for us to be seen and heard. And it's probably one of the needs that has been ignored for decades now in organizations. And we do all these superficial things, as you've mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, like surveys and pulse surveys and engagement surveys and whatnot. But when it comes to actually sitting down with people and having a conversation and trying to understand what the experience is like for them, what they need, what they want, for some reason, it's never happening. And I wonder, first of all, whether it would be useful to think about what might be the reasons why these conversations are not happening. Is it fear of what we're going to hear? Is it something else? What is your interpretation? Because I guess that's probably, if we can get to the root cause, maybe also it's easier than to create that culture of listening within organizations.
Yeah, this really, I think, pivots into leadership, where to me, leadership and DE&I is all one and the same, because Chuck Bush, who was a dear, dear, dear mentor and sponsor for me when I was in the military. He was the first Black graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. I would not have graduated or had a military career if it wasn't for him. His nickname was the grandfather of diversity for the Air Force. And he would always say, DE&I is a leadership problem. It is a leadership issue. It is leadership's problem to solve. And the reason why I think people are not asking these questions is because what I have found, Aga, is that outside of the military, we use leader and manager as synonyms, and they're not.
Yeah. Tell us about the difference in the way you see it.
Yeah. You manage resources, you manage projects, you manage the business, you lead people. That takes conviction, that takes compassion. And here's the other thing. At the Air Force Academy and the military as an officer, they told us every day, you will be a leader no matter what. You are a leader. You get to choose, though, the adjective that people use that goes in front of that word.
I love that.
You can be an effective leader. You can be a transformational leader. You can be a compassionate leader. You can be a poor leader. You can be an ineffective leader. You can be a bad leader. But you're going to be a leader. But you have control over the adjective that goes in front of that.
What was yours? What is yours still today?
You know, the thing that I love about that is I tell people, go ask my team. Right? Like I have control over my actions, but other people get to decide what that word is, right? I will tell you, most of them are positive, but I'm not perfect. I still continue to grow and learn. I think some of the words that come up often is, and I think it's also who you ask. If you ask my other peers, other execs, they'll be like, oh, Chair's a protective leader, very protective of her team, right? she is a demanding leader. I demand a lot from my team, but I also take care of my team. I expect a lot, but I take care of them. So therefore, I have money in the bank to ask that of them. You can't take before you give.
Yeah.
And I give my teams a lot, and therefore I can demand a lot.
And that's an important differentiation there, or a nuance perhaps, because often we see leaders who try to embrace that philosophy. Some people call it tough love or whatever, where you set really high standards, you demand a lot from your people without supporting them, or maybe they demand first and then they support. And I think what you're saying is so important, that you really have to make sure that you give first before you make demands of your people. And I think for a lot of leaders, they miss that nuance.
Yeah. And that goes back to that radical candor, right? Of you can't challenge directly until you care personally.
Correct. Yeah.
And I care deeply. The thing for leadership is that people will say, well, Trier, what type of leader are you? I am the type of leader that my team needs me to be. I am the type of leader that my team needs me to be, but I'm also the type of leader on an individual level that each person on my team, whether they report to me or not, needs me to be.
How do you know? How do you know what leader they need in the moment?
You have to ask questions. I also use a lot of tools. There's a fantastic tool that I've recently been introduced to that's been so helpful called Trimetric. And it's a very, very in-depth. It's like takes a whole bunch of tools and brings them together, but you can do a team analysis and it shows me where the gaps are on my team so I can show up and be that type of person.
Nice.
But I ask, I pay attention, I listen, right? I have people on my team where everyone wants to be recognized. There's people on my team where recognition means in a daily stand-up saying, hey, Aga, good job. You did great on that deck. Appreciate the work there. Versus someone else, it could be writing thank you on a Post-it and sticking it on their desk so it stays there so they can constantly look at it. Versus someone else, it could be I whisper to my CEO, hey, Aga did a really great job on that deck. Can you just send her a message and say that I shared that with you? But if I do one of those things, for someone who doesn't value that, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, so true. And that's a challenge, right, for a lot of leaders again, and circling back to my question, like, why don't people do that? Because again, it goes back to listening. It goes back to leadership, obviously. And your answer is you really need to put your own adjective in front of this word leadership. And then I imagine really be consistent and hold yourself accountable to that intention, right? Find people, perhaps, I don't know what, I'm really curious because you've mentioned, and I appreciated that you try and you are not perfect and you're still learning. So I would be curious to learn, what do you do to keep yourself accountable to your objectives and the way you need to show up for your team? Because sometimes, life can take over, let's be honest, right? We all get busy. We are humans. We get tired. We get frustrated. It's not always easy. I'm thinking about our business and our team, and there hasn't been a single day when I wouldn't have thought I should have handled it differently. It wasn't great, right? I'm not proud of myself. Not a single day.
Not a single day.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a quick example, right? When this podcast comes out, every time I do a podcast, because just work is something on the side and I'm transitioning from that and, just starting to do things like when I have capacity of speaking and engaging. And so, but like my full-time job is running a venture studio. I'm investing in building these biotech companies, but this podcast will come out. I will send it to my entire team and they will listen to it and they give me feedback. And they'll say, Trier, you said a lot. Whatever it is, when I do podcasts talking about leadership or DE&I, I do podcasts talking about the work that we do. One time I got something wrong with a scientific idea that I was explaining that I'm still learning and they corrected me. But I had to build the rapport for them to do that. I remember I sent an email once that was just getting information to the whole team. I forwarded it to my CEO. He said, great, thanks for sharing. And then he also said, hey, you misspelled it, auto-corrected to president when I meant to say precedent. And he told me, and I was like, thanks. The next time I had a team meeting, I turned to my team and I said, so hey, that email that I sent, anyone have any feedback on anything from it? Everyone was like, no. I said, did you all read it? They were like, yep. I said, so no one caught that it said president versus president? And there's a couple people that were like, yeah. And I was like, no one was going to tell me. I said, if our CEO catches a typo in an email or anything before you all do and you all saw it first, I was like, I'm coming for you. Okay? Because that's not what we're doing here. And so now I love it. I get any typo. I'll get a text message. I get a Slack. Like they catch, and it's great, right? So you have to create that space where everyone knows it. Give me feedback, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I lost my cool in a stand-up the other day. And someone on the team pulled me aside and was like, I just want to give you some feedback.
Nice.
I think that was just overdoing it a little bit. The team, it's going to bring the team together, but it's going to pull us a little bit apart from the larger organization because of how you reacted to that. And I know that you were frustrated and upset, but maybe showing that to the team wasn't the right place. And they were absolutely right.
That's such a testament to your leadership, Trier, because it's hard. It's hard to get that kind of feedback. You really need to work hard at it. This is what I've learned, that it's not enough to say, hey, give me some feedback. It doesn't work like that.
You have to call yourself out. Lead by example. I call myself out all the time.
Yeah.
It opens the door.
Be vulnerable first, right? Before you ask others to be vulnerable. Totally. So talk to me for a bit about your studio. I imagine that maybe it doesn't have a lot to do with company culture, but I think it's always such an interesting direction to go into, what people are passionate about and why they're doing it. Why is it so important for you? Why are you spending so much time on it?
It has everything to do with people and culture. I love it. Yeah. So what I really appreciate is that Eric Anderson, my CEO, who's the CEO of Alloy Therapeutic and the board. So Alloy Therapeutic does platform and discovery services for making drugs, for making medicines. The idea was, what happens if we take all this information that we're getting as we're helping running experiments for other companies to create drugs, if we then create a venture engine within this where we're creating companies that leverage our services. Proof of concept worked, and then they were like, we actually need a leader to actually build this out, scale it. And so that's my role as the president of 82VS, the venture studio. But they said, we don't want someone with a biotech background. We've got that. We don't want someone with venture background. We've got that. We actually need someone that understands people.
Oh my God.
Building teams and building culture. And the reason why Eric thought this is that he said there's 3 reasons why biotech companies fail. He said one is that they run out of money. He said that's not going to be the problem, right? Because we're putting the money into these companies. 2, he said it's the science. We have no control over the science. But when the science is not there, we iterate and we take it and we try something different. He's a serial entrepreneur in biotech. He said the 3rd reason why biotech companies fail are people.
Yeah.
And he said, so I have to have someone that gets the people right. So he was like, we're going to go find a people leader.
Especially leaders, right? Immediately I'm thinking Theranos and what a disaster it was. And it didn't have to be probably, but
right. People. I've been in the VC ecosystem. I've worked at venture-backed companies. I have invested. So it's not like I'm just brand new, but I've never actually written these checks, and we're raising our first fund right now. So it's the first fund that I've ever raised, a $25 million seed fund.
Congrats.
And so it's really exciting. But I go, if there's something, but I'm a leader. I know how to build teams. And again, I learned in the military and at the Air Force Academy, people are like, but you don't know biotech. I don't. And I'm very comfortable with that because I was taught as a leader, Trier, as an officer in the military, you're not going to be a subject matter expert. It's not your job. That's your enlisted troop job. Your job is to be a leader, to get them what they need so they can do their job. Take care of your people so your people take care of the mission.
That's how you introduce yourself. And I love that. Yeah.
I do not lose sleep that people are like, you don't know biotech, you don't know VC. I don't. I have a fantastic team around me who does. Almost everyone on my team has a PhD. They are absolutely brilliant. I love that I'm not the smartest person in the room.
Oh, I'm so glad that I asked this question. So glad.
You're not going to outwork me. But yeah, and it's fantastic and I love it. But it has so much to do with culture. We're building the team. We're scaling the team. I'm very protective of our culture. We did an offsite and I told my team the power of my, as a leader and on a team, the power of my. When I was a second lieutenant, I had just graduated from the Air Force Academy and I was in a meeting. The general introduced the 2 lieutenants And the general said, "This is Lieutenant Bryant." And then he turned to, the other person. He said, "This is my Lieutenant Johnson." And the chief, the chief is the most senior enlisted person. If you want any job in the world, I still believe this to the day, you want to be a chief in the Air Force. You're 20 plus years in, you're at the top of your rank, and you can say and do whatever you want. And you are just so well respected, and they are just gems of people. And the general's chief pulls me aside and said, "LT, you've got a problem." And I was like, "Chief, I just graduated from the Air Force. I'm a lieutenant. I have a lot of problems. Like, I don't know anything, right? But what is my problem today?" And he said, "You don't belong to the general." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "When he introduced you, he said, 'That's Lieutenant Bryant.' But he said, 'That's my Lieutenant Johnson.'"
Ah.
And what the general does, and in the military, when the power of my is it signals to everyone, "That's my lieutenant." So if you do anything to that lieutenant, you engage with them as engaging with me, "That's my lieutenant." And I told my team, I said, "You are my team. You are my venture partner. You are my venture associate. You are my computation biology. You are my chief of staff. You are my enablement team. You are mine." And when I talk about my team, I say, "That's my team." I also talk about my CEO like that. "That's my CEO." So if you come from my CEO, you come from my team, you're coming from me. So be careful.
I love it. So now I understand why your team would say that you are protective
I
as
am
well.
protective.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Trier, I wish we had more time to talk. Oh my gosh, this was so good. I need to shift gears because we're running out of time. There is a section in this show that we call rapid fire questions. Probably not a surprise. I'm going to ask you questions in a rapid fire succession. And the challenge is 5 questions. Let's try to answer them in under 2 minutes.
Go for it.
At CultureBrained, which is my company, we're on a mission to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. What is your number one tip to bring more meaning to work?
Create an environment where people can be their authentic selves, to communicate and engage authentically.
Great. What is the sign or signs, plural, that a company culture needs some work, or perhaps even a major overhaul?
Facial expressions.
What company do you admire for the culture, if any? And if you do have one, why?
Oh, that's such a hard one because I feel
I
like things
know.
that I may admire about a culture, I admire Goldman Sachs's culture of excellence.
I love the way you phrase it. What books? And it can be really anything, philosophy, leadership, culture, whatever. What books would you recommend to our listeners?
There's a fantastic book called 5, Where Will You Be in 5 Years? And it is like a workbook. The newer version is like black with multiple colors. It is fantastic. I do it every year on my birthday to ask myself the same questions every year of like, where do I want to be in 5 years, values, and I keep them. That is by far one of my favorite books.
We'll put a link in the show notes for everyone interested. And I definitely am going to get one. I'll tell you something about it, but let's go for time now. So final question. What is one thing that our listeners can do tomorrow to build their own culture lab and to start cultivating a culture that will genuinely help them and their teams to bring their vision to life?
Start disrupting bias in the moment when it happens. Create a shared vocabulary. Use purple flag. Tell everyone to use purple flag when they notice bias. Teach everyone to do when that happens. The first thing you do is you say thank you. And then you say either, yes, I get it, or no, I don't. Let's talk after the meeting and figure it out. And 3, have a shared commitment from your team that everyone is going to disrupt bias at least once in every meeting. Start disrupting bias today.
Thank you so much. I love it. And a quick follow-up question that I have about the book that you've recommended and this exercise. When you look back at where you wanted to be 5 years ago, have you usually exceeded your expectations? What does that look like?
My mom always said growing up, think big and then think bigger. And I would say that I do think big and then challenge myself to think bigger. But every time I look back, I am so far beyond my wildest dreams.
I use this exercise as well. I think it was actually inspired. I don't know about the particular book that you've recommended, but there was this exercise inspired by Milton Glasser, the designer, where he asked his students what their ideal life would be, like an ideal day in their life in 10 years from now. he said that he actually kept in touch with his students, and every single person who took the time to describe that day have exceeded their wildest expectations. And so I started doing it with some of our clients, some of my coaching clients, and with myself as well. And it's just magic. I don't know how it works, but it's incredible. It really is.
Yeah.
Trier, thank you so much for being in conversation with me today.
Thank you for having me.
I really hugely enjoyed it. And I'm so grateful for the work that you are doing, for the leadership that you are bringing to the world. I think it's much needed, and we need those role models. We need people to be able to learn from people like you. There's so much still to improve and make better, especially in the workplace. It's not a great place for people to be. So we have a lot of work to do, and it becomes easier thanks to people like you. So you have my gratitude, and I wish you also all the best with your venture studio.
Thank you.
I understand that it's important work. The team has a great leader, so I'm sure that there's a lot of success in front of you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Aga. Appreciate it.
I'm Aga Bajer, the creator and host of the Culture Lab podcast. And this is the Culture Lab team.
Anis and Labarawi, production manager.
Sound producer, Heather McPherson, Twisted Spur Media.
Thank you for joining Trier and me for this episode of the Culture Lab podcast. If you found any moments that were interesting, inspiring, or maybe even game-changing, please share this episode with someone who might appreciate it. After all, good ideas are meant to be shared. And for those who would like to get to know Trier and me personally, she will also be a guest in the CultureBrained community soon. If you're a member already, keep an eye out for her fireside chat. If you are not a member, CultureBrained is one-of-a-kind culture accelerator program and a global community for culture leaders who look for new ways of cultivating remarkable cultures in this brave new world of remote and hybrid work. If you are in charge of a culture-shaping project, and if you believe that work should be synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging, you probably need CultureBrained in your life. You can learn more at tinyurl.com/CultureBrained, and you'll find the link in the show notes. And now, a quick preview of the upcoming episode. This time my guest is Nikki Gattenby. It's Nikki's second time on the show, and she's also a double best-selling author on the subject of engagement with Super Engaged and purposeful work with Better Business on Purpose. Nikki has led successful marketing agencies in London, Paris, and Brighton, and she has a track record for taking these companies global. She also has a track record in creating an amazing work environment for people. In this snippet, Nikki talks about shifting from value to values. Tune in to hear the full interview with her in 2 weeks from now.
Shifting from value to values. For far too long, it's been about money. And I'd argue it's not acceptable anymore. And I think that's, again, not right. But Yvonne Chouinard from Patagonia has said it, profits happen when we do everything else right. And Patagonia are an absolute poster child for this. And, he said a company needs to be profitable in order to stay in business, but it's to accomplish all its other goals. And that's the shift. Profit becomes the fuel for the business, not the reason for it to exist. Much like having a car, you don't have it just to put fuel in it. You have it to go on adventures and do great things. Same, I would argue, applies for business. So there's some big fundamental shifts there.
Thanks again for tuning in. If you want to get free resources on cultivating a remarkable, powerful, and authentic company culture, especially in a business that scales, type this into your browser: agabayer.com/resources. If you haven't subscribed to the Culture Lab yet, please do it now. That's the best way you can support our work. And finally, We would be ever so grateful if you could rate and review our podcast on the platform that you listen to. Thank you, and you are amazing for listening to this point. Not many people do.